More from Dave and Wayne in due course. But next up, a special guest. Here's a glimpse of her story.
A lot of people seem to think that girls from my background just tend to be a stay-at-home mum that cooks and cleans.
Oh my god, I hate trigonometry.
I think we're good. I'm preparing to race for the Magnolia Cup. I'm not really sure what to expect. I've never been on a racehorse. I've never raced.
We're going on the bumper cars.
Today to make up ground.
I had my first go on a racehorse this morning.
Did you?
Go. Going to the next exercise.
He's at the bottom of a steep curve.
We really need to raise the game.
I'm afraid to tell you that we failed.
Shut up, I got it.
My name is Khadijah Mellah. A big part of my life has just been proving people wrong about what a person like me can achieve.
Runners being called forward for the Magnolia Cup.
What else do you want to know?
And here she is, yes indeed, winning jockey, a film star, media lovey now as well, doing the tour alongside Oli Bell, who joins us in the studio as well. I suppose we have to call him filmmaker now, Oli Bell. How are you? It's feet on the ground, time to enjoy all of the last few months?
I still look back at the footage and go like, is that me?
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I'm still not quite there, but looking back at it, I'm like still shaken by the whole experience.
We got to see the premiere of the film on ITV after the World Cup final, indeed, yesterday. So it was a great kind of platform. Have you had sort of texts and messages? Did you get a chance to watch it back?
All my friends that have sort of gone off to uni, so I haven't been in contact with them, have then watched it and then come to me and been like, I didn't even realise like how amazing your summer had been.
Yeah.
And loads of people, like even strangers, have been sending me amazing, like emotional messages, and it's so nice.
So Oli, I suppose that's kind of the impact you wanted to have. That's one of the reasons that you made the film, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. I mean, at the start, the idea was formed to try and shine a light on Ebony Horse Club in Brixton, which is just this amazing centre where Khadijah and her brother ride every Sunday. I think Khadijah's been going for the last 6 or 7 years of her life, and I didn't really know about it until 2 years ago when we linked to a news piece about it on the opening show. And I'd lived in Denmark Hill for a couple of years, so half a mile down the road was Ebony Horse Club, which I, a man who has worked in racing for 15 years, didn't know about. So I thought there was something wrong there, the fact that we didn't know about places like this. So my job, or my idea, was in the hope of promoting Ebony, but then because of Khadijah's sort of groundbreaking success, the fact that she has now become a role model to young men and women out there, there's lots of different strands to this story which have had, from those messages and the reaction, an incredibly positive impact. So I'm very proud of the film, but first and foremost, I'm incredibly proud of Khadijah, because to do this, you needed someone who was able to be determined, ambitious, to persevere, but she's done it all with a wonderful manner, and we've become great friends, but she's just a real force.
Did you know that you kind of had that in you? That, I suppose it came across like a fighter's instinct, really.
She's a black belt in karate. That's not a joke. She is. She's definitely a fighter.
So, but that determination, where does that come from?
I think not many people have asked that question, actually. But I think it's to do with my upbringing and my parents, because both my dad and my mum have the same attitude, and I feel like it was just instilled into me whilst I was growing up. I didn't even notice it. That's why, to me, when I look back at everything, I'm like, I just did me. Like, to me, it's not as big of a deal as certain people have conveyed it to me, and I'm like struggling to understand how people sort of see the whole story. But yeah, from my upbringing, my parents, how they sort of went from sort of nothing to, having a family and children that are going to school and doing relatively well, took them a lot of effort and mental willpower, and I think that's sort of just ingrained in me whilst I was growing up. How did
the first trip to the Ebony Horse Club come about? Because there's some amazing shots of the kind of backdrop of the high rise. I mean, I know Brixton well. I lived there in around there for many years when I was in London, and I had no idea that was there. I mean, it is right in the epicentre of it, isn't it? How did that first visit come around for you?
My mum saw a leaflet while she was on the way to a mosque in Brixton, and I've always wanted to ride. Like, I've always been like pushing to ride, and we ended up having to travel really far. And then when I found out about Ebony, literally within the next couple of days, I was like, I don't believe you, but we're going to go and check it out. We went to see it, and there was horses, and I was like, what?
In the middle of Brixton?
Yeah, I was like, it's been here for 3 or 4 years, and I had no idea. I was just so annoyed at myself for not finding out earlier, because it would have meant that I would have ridden earlier, and I was on the waiting list for ages because loads of people wanted to be involved. But yeah, it was a massive shock because I was like...
So there's a waiting list to actually get... I heard there was a waiting list for volunteers, actually, to, you know, people who might know about horses and how to deal with horses themselves and could help tacking up. I've heard there's a waiting list for that, Ollie. Is there room for expansion?
To be honest, you'd have to speak to everybody about that, but I know there's 150 children that are there, and I think that's their sort of capacity.
Yeah. How long did you have to wait to get in?
I was in the waiting list for a year, but then I think they lost my application, and then I had to reapply.
But you got there in the end.
In the end.
And you described it as a riding centre stroke youth club.
It is.
As well. What were the facets of it besides and what sort of people were there alongside you?
So the lessons are structured where you come in for 30 minutes after school, but then as you progress, you then spend more time and you start to do more yard work. And automatically, when you're working on the yard, you know, you struggle at first and you end up asking other people for help, and you end up socialising just on the yard.
You have to,
yeah,
essentially.
Yeah, you have to. And then not only that, but when you go inside, there's like a little kitchen and a little common room, so people end up just chilling there,
interacting and socialising. So you've made friends just through that.
Oh yeah, I've made a friend that has now gone to uni, and I'm at Brighton with him, and I've known him for like a good 5 to 6 years. So.
Oh, fantastic. And I know, because I've always been a horse racing fan, but not necessarily a horse fan, and it took me a while to sort of envelop myself in the country, the horse world, if you like. And I must admit, when I first started being around horses, they're very intimidating creatures, aren't they? Was it natural to you? How did you find it early on, just being around horses?
I've always just been very in love with just horses. Like I've never been intimidated. I did at some points get quite nervous around them because I've had a couple nasty experiences. But it's always just been a foundation of I adore them. And
getting on a horse and then learning to ride with her, rising trot and all of that. I mean, it's such a weird thing, isn't it, rising trot?
I was actually quite impatient with my learning, and I was always like, can I level up? Can I go to the next, next group? And I was definitely not ready. But I've always loved trying to sort of reach further in my riding and try and advance. But I loved the lessons at Ebony because the way they structured is great, because you end up being with the people that are on your level, and it's like lessons, like proper lessons. Yeah,
that's a fantastic. So and the opportunity to ride in the Magnolia Cup was, I don't know if you know this, Ollie, was there a sample of who could possibly do it? Was it a choice between you and 3 or 4 others? So
what happened was, when I had the idea initially, everything that happened for this story to be told happened kind of probably upside down. So the initial idea I had was to take a rider from Ebony and get a slot in the race, but I didn't have a film crew at the time or a rider, but I had a slot in the race because I said Sir Peter O'Sullivan lunch and Adam Waterworth from Goodwood was on my right, and I said, look, I'm kind of thinking about this idea, can you just give me a spot in the Magnolia Cup and I'll get the other sort of pieces of the puzzle put together. Then I went to Ebony and said, I've got a spot in the race, now we need a rider. And then they said, because of the sort of qualification for the race, you had to be 18 or over, and a female, obviously, it's a female-only race, charity race. And they put forward Khadijah, and a girl from Alice, who's a lovely girl. She works up in Newmarket. She's working for Godolphin and sort of full-time employment in racing, which is fantastic, and another sort of racing success story from from Ebony, but because Khadijah was based in Peckham still, and when Mattia and Tom, the directors, spoke to Khadijah, they saw that determination, that sort of commitment, that focus that I suppose when you undertake a challenge of this magnitude you need to see. So that's how that came about.
Yeah.
And then we in an ideal world, you probably wanted to film like 3 or 4 people because of the size of the task. We definitely put all our eggs in one basket. So when, as you'll see in the film, Khadijah failed her first riding assessment 5 weeks before the race, we're there going, all right, lovely, we actually don't have a film because there's no ending to this film now other than like a girl getting told she's failed an assessment on a train, which isn't quite the Hollywood ending that we'd anticipated at the start, but thankfully Khadijah's determination meant she took another test, and obviously the rest is history.
Yeah, and I rode in a charity race, and I went from not riding at all to riding.
Oh, that's...
And I know, so I know how much work goes into that, and I was probably riding out sometimes 4 or 5 times a week. I was doing fitness pretty much every night. I'd be doing squats in my living room and all of that.
Can you imagine doing that when you're doing your A-levels and fasting for Ramadan?
This is the thing. I mean, you were studying for the most important exams of your young life then. How difficult was that?
It was very not great. For the first 2 weeks, that's when I had the sort of intense build-up towards my A-levels, and the revision was just shocking because I wasn't focusing and my brain was just melting.
Too much to think about.
Yeah, I like the Ramadan and the revision, and generally speaking, I procrastinate a lot, so it just wasn't helping. But I think the racing and the training was sort of like an escape, to be fair. Even though at some points my parents would be like, you need to focus more. To be fair, I don't think I would have performed any better with or without the racing, because, in fact, I think it probably benefited me a bit because it got quite stressful. And seeing horses often helped. But the fasting affected my training in terms of my fitness. But thankfully, I picked that up as soon as Ramadan was over, because that was only for 2 weeks of my training.
Right, so, okay. I know Amir Khan, the boxer, he could only fight at certain times a year. He had to fit it around Ramadan as well, and that was really punctuated into his life. But when you went to the British Racing School, was that the point where you really were able to knuckle down and focus and get on with it? What was that like?
Because it was structured really well, and it was quite repetitive, and I started with racing. It's all about technique, I think, or I believe. And
there's so much that goes into it, isn't there?
True.
That's the thing.
And the repetitive nature of the course they gave me meant that I could completely fine tune my sort of technique and get it like where I want it to be and pick up on all the issues. And because I was riding and training and the fitness was so intense, it meant that my progression accelerated really well.
You've just, I think with horses, with any sport I suppose, you've just got to do it and do it and do it again and again and again. Were you seeing each and every day, week to week, the building blocks? Were you gaining confidence? Because sport is often like that, isn't it?
With horses, sometimes it's sort of like a graph that goes up and down. So it would it'd be going good, and then I'd have an issue, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm not getting any better. And then I think what really sort of encouraged me and built my confidence was when I'm getting run away with, not being able to panic anymore, and actually being able to think about what to do in that moment. Because before, I'd just be like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm gonna die.
It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Because you ride a horse and you think of the reins as a brake. Whereas the more experienced jockeys will say you have to give a little bit to take a bit back, and that being, they say, soft hands is what not being too tense and those are the things. But it's so difficult to do that early on.
When you're panicking, you don't think about, oh wait, should I shift my weight back? Like, it's just pull and scream like.
Actually, the interesting thing in the film was your brother, who kind of wants that kind of career, I suppose, or that possibility in his life as well. He was kind of along every step of the way. Was that helpful to him? Was he quite envious? He looked like he enjoyed being part of your journey.
When I told him about it initially, he was like, "What?" Because I didn't quite appreciate, the Magnolia Cup and the whole experience, because I wasn't sort of into racing at all. But he was really excited about it, and then he was like, "Okay, if I'm not racing and you are, I'm going to mentor you." I was like,
so he's living vicariously through you, I suppose. Yeah.
But he enjoyed it, and I loved because he stayed with me up at Newmarket, and it meant that I had someone to talk to continuously during the whole of my training. And because he's my brother, we'd end up like every lunchtime, talking about the experience in the morning, because he'd ride out with Chris Wall, I'd ride out with Charlie Fellows, and we'd come and talk about our experiences in the morning.
So you were living and breathing horses pretty much every.
Yeah.
He's taking out an amateur licence, is that right?
Yeah, hopefully this December he will be taking his test and hopefully he'll pass.
Wow, fantastic. So he wants to have a career in racing?
Yeah, definitely. He really wants to get into racing and do some races. But I think he still wants to go to university because he's doing his A-levels next year. So sort of we're kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah, juggling.
Yeah.
And you didn't ride a horse called Run on Sterling, did you?
I did.
Did you?
Oh,
so
my goodness.
He's the horse that when I failed my first riding test down at Newmarket, failed it, and he was the reason why. Run on Sterling.
I had a very bad.
He took the mickey out of me completely.
He's quite cheeky. My first go on him, because he's quite chunky, I was like, I should be fine. And he took me by surprise and bolted, and I was like, what is going on?
He unseated me.
Yeah, he bucks a lot, and I was like, how are you so big and being able to lift your bum that high?
Naughty little devil. Oh well, but then these are all it's a steep learning curve, isn't it? These are the bumps in the road.
They kept me on him for a while, and then eventually I figured it out. And that for me was again progression. And from going to panicking, getting run off with, and nearly being thrown off, to then just having good rides on him. That was what made the journey great, because I was like, okay, I'm learning something, and I'm sort of building not only knowledge and technique and skill, but also I'm sort of connecting with horses and getting to understand racehorses, and just becoming a better rider, which is to me a massive achievement, because I just didn't think I'd get to that point. And
with horses, there is almost a slightly spiritual thing, isn't there? There's a something, a connection you can't quite put your finger on.
Yeah, some people don't get on with horses, and it's sort of unexplainable. And some people do, and I think I agree with that. And
when I saw you the first time you went up the gallops, I think with you might have been with Hayley Turner in Someone Else.
Oh yeah, Hayley
and it really brought it back to me, because I remember the first time that I sat actually on a thoroughbred and went up the gallops, and there was a horse at the Keithleys, a grey horse called Merlin's Wish, who was like a 3.5 mile, 4 mile chaser, so pretty much one of the slowest horses in the whole yard. But for me, that first time up the gallops, he was like a Ferrari. I couldn't believe it, and when I watched you in the film, I got that feeling all over again of wow, what an amazing experience it is to do that.
My first canter down the straights in Newmarket didn't actually go that well, because I was so eager. I think the horse felt the eagerness, and then we set off way too quickly, and I overtook someone and their horse kicked me, and then I overtook another person, which, as you know, you're not supposed to do that at all.
No.
But yeah, to me, I thought that's it. I'm galloping. This is it. I'm going at race pace. And then I spoke to Chris afterwards, and he was like, "That was not race pace." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
I could not believe it. I was like, "They go faster."
Yeah. That's Nick Bentley, your jockey coach, who actually mentored me a little bit as well. I saw his reaction in the film. He said, that's not even going down to the start
pace. I was like, right then, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Ollie, the whole experience, has it been a bit like being a sort of proud big brother?
Definitely, yeah. Well, without a shadow of a doubt. I think going into this, there was quite a simple reason for doing it for me. And that was, as we talked about, Ebony. But actually what I've gained, hopefully lots of people have watched the film, but what I fundamentally have gained is an incredible friendship with Khadijah, like I'm sure and I hope I'll have for life. And I think that I'm so glad that the world that I live in day to day have been able to see just how brilliant a person Khadijah is. And as I said at the premiere on Monday night, there's 150 other Khadijahs at Ebony Horse Club alone. There's the Urban Equestrian Centre in Leicester that have a load of children like Khadijah. And I actually spoke to Freedom Zampadalis, who runs the Urban Equestrian Centre, and I said to him, you know, what are your thoughts about how us as an industry can become more accessible for children at your centre? And he said, it's quite simple, you just need to give us a chance. Like, we're the underdog, we're expected to lose, is what he said to me. But if you give us an opportunity, you'll see that we will grab it and excel. And I think that the other thing that's interesting about what you guys were talking about there is, for you, your experience was horse racing first and then horses. But for Khadijah, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Khadijah, but I think it was horses first and then horse racing. And I think we as a sport need to understand that we can't be arrogant and go, horse racing's great, come to us. We have to through horses or whatever it is, reach areas we haven't reached before, and then spread our sort of bug, if you like. Everyone talks about the racing bug, but we've got to take that. I don't want to make it sound like flu, but we've got to take that sort of, take it to areas that we don't normally go to, because otherwise, and John Neild was talking about syndicates and things earlier, and he said that with the established owners, that if they go, like Jigginstown are going to step out of the way, we need to reach areas that we haven't reached before, because otherwise I don't think the sport will be as vibrant and as thriving as we want it to be in the future.
Well, there has to be, whether it's the Ebony Club or any other, that has to be a template for what's possible. I mean, you could have that in Mile End up in North London. You could have that, and that's just London, never mind in Manchester and Sheffield and up in Glasgow and so on and so forth. I mean, that template could be, and we should say fair play to Great British Racing, who have been sort of co-promoters of this film alongside.
And this is the other message which I said at the premiere, but when myself, my brother, the other producer, and Tom and Mattia, the two directors, had this idea, we then needed money for the film, and we went to Great British Racing. We pitched the idea to them. They, along with the Racing Foundation and Goodwood, funded the project. And then we went to the racing school when we needed Khadijah to have extra tuition. They said yes. Everyone along this way sort of united and said yes. And I think a lot of times in racing, if at any stage someone said no to us, this story would not have been able to be told. This incredible woman would not have been able to be seen in our industry. And that's because people said yes. And I know it sounds so basic, but I think it's a really important message, because things won't happen when people say no in this industry. They just frankly won't. So saying yes has meant that we were able to tell the story, and a huge thanks does go to the people that put it on. I know it sounds really simple, but something that I don't know whether Khadijah thinks it would help. But, for example, say my mum's a teacher in a school in Catford, a state primary school in Catford. She asked me to go and do a talk, and I've written an article for the Racing Post on Tuesday about this. And I went in there, and all the kids there, I remember those talks when I was at school. I hated them. I could not care less what some goofy...
Unless you can just catch
race.
them. Yeah.
And then I showed them the head cam footage, the jockey camera footage of a horse race. It wasn't Khadijah's race. It wasn't your race, don't worry. They didn't hear you screaming. But it's great footage.
I love that. We're going to come to that in a minute.
Don't want to hear that.
But their eyes lit up. And for them, racing was never part of the conversation. But if we as a sport can go into the classrooms and different areas, and then, hopefully they'll then go home to their mum and go, oh, you'll never guess what I saw today.
Well, that's
amazing footage.
It's like an action
Can I go racing on Saturday?
Yeah, it's like an action movie,
Absolutely.
isn't it? Let's to take us back to the race itself, race day. Were you nervous? Because it's such an unknown. I remember thinking, in my childhood years, I have no idea what it's going to be like going to the start. I mean, how difficult it's going to be, and it's just the step into the unknown. Was it like that for you?
The canter down, I think, actually it wasn't the best bit, but it was one of my favourite bits of the race, just cantering down and then spotting a couple of my friends in the crowd. That was my favourite bit, I think, but also the finishing line.
Well, you're 4 or so from the left in the white cap. You got a good start, which is the thing they always bang on about, don't they?
Everyone was telling me, I was in tears beforehand, just out of nervousness, and I remember Nick Bentley shaking me and being like, listen, get the start right, right.
Yeah, which you did. And here, I mean, what are you thinking? You're about 5th or 6th now, you look quite relaxed.
Valeria's in front of me, and I remember seeing a gap and pulling him out, and then I remember looking at the post and thinking, okay, we've got a furlong and a half.
So you're actually that aware during the race. Fair play, because it happens in a blur.
Because in my gallop with Charlie, he made me focus on the furlong markers.
Ah, good advice. Good advice. Did you think you'd won?
When I crossed the finishing line, yeah.
You thought you'd won?
I was because basically I didn't see
the other horse,
previous company coming up at all, so I just thought, oh my god, that's it.
I mean,
it's bonkers, isn't it?
It is bonkers.
I said to Khadijah, because obviously after the failed assessment and everything, I was there giving the worst advice, like obviously everything that Nick
the night before.
Don't push, just stay on. Like even if you've got a sniff, don't worry, just get home safe, and then we'll all have a nice day, and that's fine. And then Abdus goes, her brother goes.
And I
told
him what Ollie said, and he was like, "Don't you dare sit there like a muppet. You gotta push. There is no way you've got an opportunity to race and you're not gonna like go for it properly." And
thank goodness you did ignore me. But the screaming and stuff, like,
well, that was
just me getting excited.
No, I know, but it's fantastic because actually, the one thing I think you forget about when you're on a horse is that your body's part of it, and you can communicate through your hands or your thighs or your knees or your legs. That's all possible. But the biggest thing is your voice, and I think a lot of young or inexperienced riders like I was, you forget that's the chain of command. It starts and ends like that, and that's what you were doing all the way through that final furlong. Here come the tears, and here's the Hollywood finish.
Yeah.
Ew.
You know what's great about it? We love boxing, and when you go to a boxing match, and Khadijah boxed as well, you kind of can really hear and feel the intensity of the sport. And I think what I love most about that, headcam footage on Khadijah, is that you really felt what it was like to be in that moment. And I think that's something that all sports should try and tap into in terms of their audience, of trying to give the audience that feeling that you are Khadijah Mellah in that moment, you know what I mean? And through her those cheers.
Absolutely, it's the sound, isn't it, Khadijah? Because I remember the first time I ever went on grass, because normally you're on the all-weather and the synthetic surface.
And it's really silent.
It's the sound, it's just so...
The thundering, oh my God.
And it's so different.
You don't actually ever train with more than, 3 people galloping around you.
Sure.
And there was a good, 12 of us?
Yes.
All just galloping down. And there is no preparation for that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then the jump off, the set off, I'd never set off from a walk. So then I was like, whoa, lost a bit of my balance. And a lot of it, the circling around for the start, I'd never practiced that either. So I think it was just a crazy, crazy race and experience.
And you've got those silks to keep.
Yeah, I've got
them. What are you going to do with them?
I don't know, I think I'm going to frame them.
You have to get them framed. They'll be worth squillions one day. They'll be worth squillions. You'll be able to one day be able to raise a pot of money for the Ebony Club or whatever, some charity. Charlie, look at the smile as well. He was a big part of the story for you, Charlie Fellows.
He was in floods of tears after. Everyone was. I get really emotional looking back at it now. It was such an amazing achievement for Khadijah.
There's your brother. Maybe one mum. Maybe one day. I mean, what was their reaction to it all? Because what were their expectations going into it?
My brother's always had the fighting instinct and attitude as same as me, so he was like, you're going to win it, you're going to have to win it. If you don't win it, there's going to be a problem. But the rest of my family, and I think my sister was doubting my ability as well, because she knew that I'd fallen off and I'd been run away with, because I'd hit her up every time I'd have a problem. But listen, I'd just been thrown off twice on the same horse, and then she's like, Khadijah, you need to pick it up. But yeah, I think everyone, because I'd said in Good Morning Britain that very day, I'm aiming for
see how easy she just dropped that in. I said, Good Morning Britain.
Genuinely the funniest. I'll tell you in a minute. I'll let
Don't you dare. I literally said, I'm aiming for 4th at best. So within me, I thought realistically, best I could do was 4th.
Yeah.
Everyone had the same attitude, because I told them, I've been training, I know how much I could push for, and I thought that my ability could only reach 4th.
Yeah.
So everyone just assumed that I wouldn't come first.
So the Good Morning Britain, right? So obviously this is as my job, and we go into Good Morning Britain studios, and I'm terrified. I'm really nervous, and Khadijah's telling me she's like, right, relax, calm, no waffle. She's such a pro. From the start, she's completely had everything just nailed.
So you're at uni now. I'm assuming you're going to go back on. Well, tonight or on Monday, bound to be people on campus who might have seen this, heard about it.
Funnily enough, not many people are into racing and horses, so I didn't really talk too much about it. And then the media department at Brighton University saw an article and they were like, hold on a second, why didn't you tell us that, you know, you'd done this race? And then they then put it on the website, and then my form tutor was then, because I told him that I did a bit of jockey training over summer, and he just thought, oh, she did a bit of jockey training. And then he came to me literally yesterday. I was like, hold on a second, you didn't tell me that you won a race.
On TV.
He's like, I'm going to watch a documentary. And I was like, a couple of my friends know. My hallmates don't really know because I just haven't had a chance to bring it up. It's a bit of a weird one to just bring up. Like, by the way, hey, I rode a race and I won. Like, it's a bit of...
I would milk it.
He would.
I really would. I'd have a T-shirt.
And so how much are horses and riding going to play in your life going forward, do you think?
I've got the racing bug and I don't think there's a cure, so I'm just going to keep racing, especially because my brother's keeping at it. I'm going hopefully up back to Newmarket in December whilst he's doing his training to then just ride out for a bit, see how I land again.
It does get you, doesn't it? Once you're there, you're there. That's a good line. That's almost as good as the line in the film where when you get to Goodwood, you say, where's my boy at? Talking about Haverland, the horse you were going to ride.
Shocking, I can't believe I said that.
Yeah, there'd be a little bit of Brixton in that, wasn't there? And are there other budding stars, do you think, at the Ebony Race Club? Would you say, well, in what way is that going to serve those young people going forward, do you think?
So the biggest impact I can share from my experience, prior to this, O'Shane, who's a young rider, he won a pony race at Ascot. Abdus is obviously going to get, touch wood, his jockey licence in December. So there's success stories that are happening every day at Ebony. But the biggest image for me that one of the lasting images of this was about 2 weeks after the win. I went back to Ebony, and Khadijah was teaching 6 children, young children of all different races, religions, backgrounds, how to sit up in the saddle like a jockey. And it wasn't Frankie Dettorio that was their role model, it was Khadijah Mellah, and hopefully that has spread throughout the country. Yeah,
and it's remiss of me not to perhaps deal with that, but as a young Muslim woman riding in a race, what kind of message do you hope that's sending out?
That they shouldn't be deterred by the fact that they're not looking the same as everyone else. Some people find it difficult to persevere in a sport just based on the fact that they don't look the same as everyone else, and that hasn't ever fazed me because I've been brought up and raised in a private school, and I just didn't look the same as anyone else. And it bothered me a little bit at some points, but eventually I just became used to the fact that I will build my own character and be who I am and just carry that through. But some people just haven't had that experience and shy away from it, perhaps, I'm not sure. But I've got messages from people who have been anxious about starting out riding, or there was actually a girl that contacted me who wears a hijab and she wasn't sure about how she felt about riding because she lived in the country and everyone there just didn't look like her, and she was telling me about her anxieties, and I was like trying to comfort her, but to me that was like crazy hearing these experiences and being able to offer some help.
Sure.
And I think that it's just enriched my life. I think it's just made life that much better.
That's what horses do. That's what horses do. Films is going to be shown again?
Yeah, so it's actually going out after the news at 10 on Monday on ITV, which is fantastic. So obviously we had a great slot for a racing film after the World Cup final, and then again on Monday, and it's obviously on the ITV hub as well. So yeah, this story which Khadijah's articulated so well here, but it's all packaged together quite nicely by talented people, way more talented than I am. So if you can watch it, please do.
You're just basking in reflected glory again.
Do you know what, genuinely, it's quite an emotional day for us because we've been on this journey for a year now from start to finish, and this is our last media interview together. But I cannot tell you how proud I am of Khadijah. She's incredible.
Sister, we're both almost Brixton people. Really enjoyed your...
So wrong.
Thoroughly enjoyed your company. Ollie's going to stick around. Thanks to Khadijah. Great to have her.
Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.